Welcome to Inside Albania with me, Alice Taylor. This week, Albania was rocked by the stabbing of a 14-year-old boy outside of a school in central Tirana. I want to find out, how did we get here? Where did we end up in a situation where youths are resorting to such violence? Prime Minister Edi Rama has stepped in and said that he may consider banning TikTok and Snapchat for youths because the row that led to the stabbing erupted on social media. But is this a solution? I'm going to be talking to a psychologist, an Albanian living in Chicago, Sonila Seideras, to find out, how do we get here? Why are youths in this mindset, and what can we do to prevent things getting worse? I'm also going to be speaking to journalist and school administrator Irma Hasimia about the situation in Albanian schools. But we're also going to talk about something a bit lighter as well. A festival taking place in Gjakova in Kosovo, Ditët in Nëntorit. We're going to be talking about culture, history and the Serbian-Kosovo war. Hajde me mua. Irma, welcome to Inside Albania. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to talk about two topics today, but let's start with the lighter of the two, which is the upcoming festival in Gjakova, Ditët in Nëntorit. I attended the Ditët in Shqiptarit in the summer with my daughter, and it was amazing. We had a great time. So when I heard there was going to be a follow-up festival, I was like, right, I'm going to go for sure. And I thought it would be good to get you here to talk a bit about the festival, its purpose, and a few other things to do with Gjakova. So, for those that don't know, Ditët in Nëntorit, what's the story behind it? What's its purpose?
Yeah, we were a group of people, of Gjakovars. So, people from Gjakova are quite connected to their own origin, included me. So, we are from Gjakova. Some of them live in Pristina. I live in Tirana. Some others in Gjakova or other places. So anyway, we decided someday to get together, we're friends, and try to do something for our city that we love a lot, because it's a city that can offer a lot. But the problem is that they're not good on marketing. They're not good on selling their own image and cultural products to the tourists. So there are a few tourists, at least for the moment. Mm-hmm. So a city that can offer a lot. But we're trying to help the city, to help the others, tourists from other places, especially from Albania, North Macedonia, or even from the Albanian diaspora. Why not international tourists, to discover Gjakova? It's a very rich city in terms of history. Some of the most important moments in Albanian history have their origin there.
Such as, for
example, the first battle of the Prizren League, mm-hmm. The nationalistic league that created they wanted to create an independent Albania, but failed, but at least made the first important step to that. The first battle was in Gjakova, mm-hmm. and the commander of this league was still the military commander, Suleiman Vokshi, was in Gjakova. Some of the most important cultural and historical personalities of Albania are from Gjakova. Like the Kreziu brothers, for example, which are very well known for those who know history. They were anti-communists who fought against the communists, cooperated with the British, mm-hmm. With the Allies. And then you have people like Bayram Turi, for example. There is a city, as you might know, in Albania, which is
Wonderful
called Bayram
city.
Turi. And it's one of the rare cases in which you have the name of a person given to a mm-hmm. city. And this guy, Bayram Turi, is someone from Gjakova.
I don't think there's others, are there, in Albania that have the name?
In Albania, we had Qyteti Stalin
before, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But then there are personalities of the day which are famous, like painters, like Abdurrahman Buza, mm-hmm. for example. He's not alive now, but or you have people like Bekim Femiu, a great actor who lived in Yugoslavia at the time, but who played in international movies. And you have football players like Lorik Cana, Besnik Hasi, singers or musicians like Shkelzen Doli, Petrit Çarkaxhia, which everybody loves in Albania, especially the younger. So it's a small city of around 45,000 inhabitants, but it has done unproportionally good
Yes.
to Albanian history and culture.
It's like they say Shkodra is the cradle of culture in Albania, and perhaps Gjakova is the cradle of culture in Kosovo.
Yes, it has been considered as such, and it was some kind of a bridge between Albania and Kosovo. And it was a city connected with Albania more than the other part of
Yes.
Kosovo, to be honest. But after the independence, it has been left outside the border. So basically, it has been cut off of its own hinterland, like the Malësia, Gjakova, Stropoja, and all the Albanian Alps. So they have their own cuisine, which is amazing.
Yes,
I know
I
it because of my
I
grandparents.
think I gained about 1.5 kilos in 3 days during my last visit.
It's not good for diets.
Because it's
but
bread, it's meat, it's cheese. It's quite a heavy sort of
it's heavy because
diet.
it's continental.
And with spices,
Yes.
like
Yes.
the spicy peppers and the
Yes.
aviar and things. This because Albanian food, like when I talk about Albania, it doesn't tend to be too spicy.
No,
But
there
the
is
food in
spicy.
Gjakova was,
It's
and I really
spicy.
liked that.
It's spicy
much.
and it's but you have to know that it's continental food. So it's more influenced by continental food.
Yeah.
It's rather bit like 2 or 3 or 4 hours from the Adriatic Sea.
Yeah.
So you don't find a lot of fish or whatever,
no.
but though you can find trouts, but it's a bit more specific. But it has its proper cuisine. If you go to other cities, like if you go to Pristina or Mališeva or Mitrovica, whatever other cities in Kosovo, they don't have a proper cuisine. You go to Gjakova, they have their own specialties.
It's immediately identifiable.
They have the famous tava with tava me patlıcan, like of tava with tomatoes and meat.
There was this bread I had, I forgot the name of it, with sausage in.
Samuna
Oh
me
my
sucuk.
God.
Yeah.
This wonderful bread with sausage in it, and just, I mean, it's dangerous.
Yes.
That
You know,
is.
there are traditions. If you go to a bakery, for example, you go at 10 in the morning.
Yeah, I
you
did.
cannot find samuna
I tried.
You
I
have
had
to
go
go
early.
earlier.
Yeah.
because there are traditions. And you know, people when they go to prepare the samunas, for example, they go there and they take the sujuk with them, the meat with them, because every house has its own
Yeah.
taste in sujuk. And like up to now, there are not so many people preparing sujuk, but I know that like 10 or 15 years ago, at least, every house, every home, every family in Gjakova was preparing its own sujuk with its own formula.
And just for those who don't know, because we have international listeners as well, the sujuk is it's a
kind of
sausage, but it's
sausage.
dried, isn't it?
It's dry.
It's
It's dry.
quite salty and preserved with salt and spices rather
But
than
it's
one
different
that you cook.
from processed
Yes.
sausages
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Europe. Like it's totally different.
Yes.
And it's made at home.
Yes, and it's very, like you said, it's very particular. Even I went with my partner there, and we were going to buy some sucuk, and he was inspecting all of them very carefully. He was like, no, this, no, and found the exact
Yes,
one he
yes.
wanted. It's not just a matter of you pick up one and that's it.
I know,
They all have very particular qualities.
And every home had its own
Taken
formula.
very
so-
seriously.
So everyone who's preparing was choosing the right combination that they liked between onion, meat, spices, pepper, and the kind of meat, etc. But the best sujuk in Kosovo is in Albania in general. So for Albanians, it's in Gjakova.
So the aim of this festival is to bring attention to the art and the culture and this place as sort of a tourist destination. I mean, it's taking place in November. It's going to be cold, but I quite like that. But it's about highlighting what the city has to offer, and that is a lot. I was there for 3 days, and it felt artistic, it felt bohemian, everyone was very friendly, there was a lot to explore. I didn't even have a chance to scratch the surface of what was sort of on offer there. So it's something I think is interesting to foreign people as well. This is not a festival just for Albanians. It's not, if you don't speak Albanian, you're not going to turn up and be completely confused and lost, It's something that will appeal to foreigners as well. What is on offer? So the festival's actually already started, and
Yes.
we have another week left,
Yes.
running up until the Albanian national holidays. What's on offer over the next sort of week for people to take part in?
Well, there are different elements. Gjakova has the biggest czarshia, bazaar, ancient bazaar, medieval bazaar in all Albanian territories where Albanians live in Albania and everywhere else.
In the Balkans,
In
I
the
think we can
Balkans,
say.
let's say. Yeah, that's right. Because I was trying to avoid
Starting a war.
nationalistic points of view. But yeah, among Albanians, wherever they are in the Balkans, they have the biggest çarşia.
Yes.
The biggest alive living çarşia.
Still with shops.
So they still the shops and everything. And so this is one of the centers. You go there, there are a lot of coffee shops and restaurants.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And
Until the early hours of the morning, music.
Yes,
and it's great.
rakia
Yeah.
and
Food.
sucuk, food and music.
Dancing.
Music, the traditional music of Gjakova, because just like the cuisine, they have a specific music
Yes.
made in Gjakova. And there are a lot of Gjakova songs who are famous even in Albania. People don't know that they're coming from Gjakova, but they're
But
from
I picked
Gjakova.
up on the differences where I was listening to some of the music last time, and I was like, okay, it sounds Albanian, but it doesn't sound like the normal Albanian music.
Not like
it
the
has a
Southern.
different structure. Even the notes, the notation was sounded different to me.
There are two main influences. First, the music is influenced by the northern Albania part, like the Alps, like the Highlanders, let's say. We can use that word, Malsort. And the other part is the influence from the medieval times, including the Ottoman Empire. So you can find those influences. But there is a strong Albanian core
Yes.
into that music. Then, çarşia is one of the places. Then the other most important place is the Teatri Hadishehu, Teatri Kulturës there. And this is where we had 2 days ago the opera, Goca e Kaçanikut, which is the first Kosovar opera made by Rauf Domi, another Gjakovar compositor. And we will have this Saturday the Ensemble Këngëve dhe Valleve, which are the national dance ensemble and from Albania. But they have a very good and excellent representation of the Albanian culture in general, because there will be songs from southern Albania, from even from Albanians who used to live in northern Greece, in Chameria. You will have Albanian, of course, songs from northern Macedonia, Montenegro maybe, and other places. So you will have a whole mosaic of the Albanian culture in general. This is going to be a great show. Then on the 28th is probably one of the most original shows. Is a group called Saziso. Some of them are living in London, some in Athens, some in Albania, and they gather together only for international concerts. And their producer is a guy who worked as a producer for Pink Floyd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine the kind of quality that they have.
I'll be there on the 28th.
Yes.
So,
This is like world music. You can put it on
Yeah.
the category of world music, but it has the best of southern Albanian music. But it's amazing. It's fantastic. It's nothing like you watch on YouTube or TV. You are there, makes you cry, makes you scream, but it's great music. It's fantastic music. Then the last night will be a gala concert, will be a concert with lyrical music from Albanian musicians and from Kosovo, and singers, of course. So then we'll have after parties every day. The after parties, which means we have some, for example, some groups from music groups at the çarşia singing in some of the different cafes with rakia and sujuk and everything else. So the old city will be, let's say, very vivid.
Yes.
Will be a vibrant city during these days, very warm. Of course, it will be cold in general outside.
Warm in mood, not in temperature.
Yes, but inside, in the heart of the city, it will be really, really hot. It will be really a great city. And we are trying to organize these activities because we want to attract people there. We want people to get to Gjakova and discover what this fantastic city is offering. And this is the goal. And this is especially interesting for people who are coming from Tirana, from Skopje, from Ulcinor, from the Albanian diaspora, but also for international tourists.
Yes.
Because it has a specificity. Gjakova is probably the most Albanian city in the Balkans. It has worked a lot for years and years, maybe centuries, to save the real spirit of being Albanian. And this is why it's a very special city. And even these activities are all 100% with connected to Albanian culture, representing the Albanian culture.
And I just want to say as well about the international tourist things, you know, for people living in the region who are maybe not Albanian, you know. I mean, I speak Albanian, but I went there, everyone was very friendly, everyone spoke English that I came across. And there was something going on constantly. From morning to night, there were different roundtables and discussions and meetings and music and huge, big concerts, and then smaller, there was just something going on everywhere. So for anyone looking for music and food, you know, who doesn't like music and food? It's definitely worth visiting. Now, you mentioned something, and it reminded me of something else you said. You know, Gjakova is the most Albanian city in the region, and I'd read previously that during the Kosovo War, one of the reasons Gjakova had suffered so much was exactly because of this, because it was so Albanian. They couldn't shake the Albanian out of them. It had very strong ties to Albania as well, and this served as a catalyst. I don't know if that's the right word, but that angered the Serbs. It made them feel like they didn't have control over it, couldn't have control over it, and this is why they were so harsh in what they did in Gjakova. I had read that. I don't know if that is something you agree with, but
absolutely, everybody agrees with it because it's easy to confirm that.
Can you explain a bit, again, for those who are listening, who may not have so much knowledge about what happened there, sort of what went on during the war there, and what has maybe led to the situation where people from Gjakova are so proud and so keen to preserve the history of their city?
Gjakova has been since immemorial times, somehow, let's say, the one of the most important centers of Albanian culture. So not only culture, but also intellectualism. Because, for example, some of the most important intellectuals and cultural personalities, historical, as I said before, personalities were coming from Gjakova. And it's a city who has been saving the Albanian tradition in a fanatical way. So they loved that and they were ready to sacrifice for that. And of course, because of these reasons, it was the first target of the Milosevic troops. And the first killings in Kosovo started in Gjakova, I mean in the street. They started killing intellectuals, professors, doctors, everywhere. And Gjakova has, just to give you an example, usually people were fighting for the UÇK at the time, the Albanian, Liberation, Kosovo Liberation Army at the time. They were coming from different backgrounds, but mostly they were based on rural areas, mountains and hills. Gjakova is the only place, the only city that had a brigade of volunteers of the Kosovo Liberation Army within the city, which means there were intellectuals, most of them they were students, even high schoolers, or people who had degrees and everything. But I mean, people like you and me, who took their arms and they wanted to defend their own city. It's the city who suffered the most. Some of these people are from my family because I am from there. So in every family where you go in Kosovo, you will find someone who disappeared, someone who died. They don't even know there are like 1,200 or 300 people who they don't even know where they are. They know that they are dead, but they don't know where they are. You can imagine this for such a small city.
45,000.
Everybody has someone of the family that they don't know nothing about from the war. So they suffered a lot for that, but they are very noble people. Like when you go to Gjakova, you don't necessarily feel that kind of pain. Somehow they try to hide it or to cover it or to go beyond it. You have to really stay with them, spend some time, and then they will open to you.
Yeah.
But they are proud and they won't come and play the victim with you. So this is Gjakova. It's a very, very special place. They have paid the high price for their willingness to safeguard the Albanian culture there.
And that's why events like this are so important, and why everybody should come to the festival in the next week.
Yes, because I think when you see the level, the quality, and the amount, the number of events during these 2 weeks of November, let's say, even if you put together Pristina and Tirana and Skopje together,
Yeah.
they don't have these activities. All of
Also,
them.
Gjakova, Kosovo, Albania, you know, they all have these demographic crises. Everyone's leaving. They're going to Pristina or the Tirana or out of the country, you know, and this culture is at risk of being lost bit by bit by bit. So by bringing people to these places, by promoting the culture, by promoting tourism, by generating money for the local community, it's an incentive for people maybe not to leave and to consider staying behind and keeping the feeling alive.
Of course. This is, I mean, we thought since the beginning that we want to help the city because it's a group of volunteers, as I told you. It's probably the only NGO in all the Balkans that not only people are not paid for the work they're doing, but they're spending money.
Yeah.
So some of us in this NGO that we created spend thousands and thousands of euros for organizing these
Yes.
activities. So this is not the typical NGO.
Yeah.
So, but we wanted since the beginning that to make the city this proud city, to make it get back to life
Yes. Yeah.
again,
important.
and we want to make them share any kind of cultural value and tradition that they have. So because we think the city is very attractive, but they don't really are good in marketing.
No.
So we are trying to organize these activities in order to attract attention. But we also want that young people from Gjakova don't go away,
Yes.
don't go abroad. We want them to find hope and to build up their own progress there in their own city. This is one of
Yes.
the goals, because there are a lot of them who are leaving, unfortunately.
Now, so the festival's going on for another week, and I will be there next week. I will be there taking part and working as well,
You
because
will
having
be
fun and working for me are the same things. But I wanted to just turn the end of our interview to another topic. You work in the education field, you have
Yes.
your own school. This week there has been a horrible incident in Tirana where a 14-year-old boy was stabbed outside the school premises. And I mean, I'm from the UK, and this sort of incident happens regularly in the UK. At the moment, the average is about 4 knife crimes a week in schools. It's not, doesn't mean it's okay, but it's something I'm more accustomed to hearing about. But it's a huge shock for Albania. It's something that seems to have taken the country by surprise. But I wanted to know, from your point of view, how did we get to this sort of situation where we have 14-year-olds running around with knives, posting them on social media? And do you see the youth of today getting more aggressive?
Not necessarily. They're going out of control. This kind of phenomena happened even before. When you compare it to the UK, it's a bit difficult to compare it, because the problem is that UK, well, you can have 4 incidents, but there are how many inhabitants in UK?
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
So if you make the proportional comparison, then it's not that different. So we had these things before, but now they're getting more. I think that the youth, young people, are getting more irresponsible, and this is because of the kind of models that were showing up, promoting on media, on social media especially, which are
Gangsters,
do
violence,
not have any kind of
drugs.
filter, of course. So someone who's 14 years old today, he will be on WhatsApp with group of young people. Even if there are 2 or 3 promoting some kind of stupid models of gangsters and everything, they will influence the others.
Yes.
And then there is some kind of covert or hidden bullying, which means that if you don't act like the others, then you are
An outcast.
excluded somehow, not excluded from your own group of social group. So the other TikTok and whatever, except where you go there, you don't have any kind of filter.
No, nothing.
And if any parent can do that, try to find some way to open the mobile phones of their own children, they will be shocked by what they read. And this is general
Yeah.
in all Albania, no matter the categories or whatever. Of course, some categories, some stratas of the society are much more vulnerable to that, but it's rather general. And then the other problem is that you have these models that are coming even from politics. You have seen criminals going up to the parliament. You're seeing there is a culture of what we call the fortet in Albania, like strong people, like gangsters in general. And these are feared, but
even this macho sort of
there is a
attitude.
toxic masculinity, of course, even that. But this is old in Albania. This is nothing new. But the social media has somehow liberalized these stupid models, these criminal models. And when you see that someone is a criminal, he has dealt with drugs, with everything, and you find it on TV, sometimes giving interviews, or even at the parliament in Albania, then for a 14 years old, for a teenager, you will say, well, okay, if I see it on TV, if I see it on the parliament,
it's okay.
It's okay. It's legit. So it's not something problematic. And then you have another step, which is important. You have parents who not necessarily spend too much time with their kids talking about that. And probably you have parents who have been born, parents of teenagers today, they're born almost at the end of communism. So they've been living the first years of their lives maybe trauma, but also with some kind of subsistence culture, in the sense that you have to survive.
Yes.
And in order to survive, you have to forget any kind of value, any kind of norm, any kind of principle, which was not the case, for example, with my parents who were born in another era, in another era in which people still went to church, to mosques, or who all the neighborhood was trying to impose to them some norms, some values, some principles. So it's a totally new generation, and it's left to itself. It's left to social media. It's left to the influence of bad models. Then the teachers, and this is another big problem, the teachers have been disarmed, which means today the authority of the school, of the teacher, is almost zero. Teachers today are afraid to talk to children, are afraid to exert their own authority, positive authority in the classroom, because the parents will come and stop that, or even threaten the teachers, or because the kids will not accept that and become aggressive, and then the school will not protect the teachers, but probably will protect the kids.
But you can also say as well, a teacher, maybe in a state school, I'm not sure what the salary is, but it's not very high. I think if they're not getting paid a lot, the motivation to care much is not as strong as it would be. And also, if you've got 40 kids in a class, 30, 40 children, and like one or two teachers, I think when you put all of these together, it becomes unmanageable for teachers to stay on top of troublesome students.
I don't think it's necessarily a problem of salary. Of course, if you have a great salary,
you're more inclined to go the extra mile.
But it's not that the biggest problem, because you can have a huge salary and still be unprotected. This is the problem. So if you go, for example, to Kosovo is still Albanians like us. So you go to Kosovo, they have lower salaries for teachers, but they don't have this kind of problem. I mean, they have it, but not at our level. Why? Because it's a society where you still can find the role of the family, traditional values, principles, etc. They might be bad or good, but in this case, they're good. You have respect for elder people and everything. So this kind of principles, you can find them in Kosovo implemented or monitored somehow, or implemented, in a much more efficient way rather than Albania. So, of course, you can raise the salaries of teachers. It will not solve the problem in total. It's just maybe 1% of the problem. But having in the classroom teachers who are afraid to talk to the students, who are afraid to exert their own authority given by the law and the logic, this is a huge problem.
Omar, thank you very much. Two very different topics there. But thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next week in Gjakova.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You will be welcome.
Sunila, welcome to Inside Albania. You will have heard this week the tragic incident which happened where a 14-year-old boy, he was stabbed outside a school in central Tirana. In the UK, we have problems like this, you know, and in the US as well, obviously. But this incident's really shocked Albania because, I mean, things like this have sort of happened before, but not like this. There've been protests. It's really, really shocked society. And I can't get my head around a 14-year-old resorting to such violent acts and also being in possession of a knife as well. And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, from your perspective, you are Albanian, you are a psychologist, you also live in the US, so you are around sort of this more violent environment in a way. I don't want to generalize, but I'm wondering if you can help me shed some light on the psychology behind how we've got in this situation.
Well, first and foremost, condolences to the family. I'm so sad for that 14-year-old boy. As a mom of a teenager, I can only imagine. However, this is more common than we want it to be. So it's not that I wasn't surprised, but it's not something that I was not expecting it either. The reason for that is complicated. It needs a lot of context, but gender, you know, it's a knife, it's not a gun, trauma, maybe abuse going on in the family. And what I really want to stress for my community, especially as the founder of Care for Albania, which focuses specifically on mental health, is the trauma that our community has had for years. We've had 45 years of isolation and communism, and then 35 years of transition. So the transition, although we're doing great strides, we need to focus on our mental health piece. So if there is one child that is troubled, the whole community is troubled. And in this case, you can see it, how the community is really upset about what happened.
But I can't help but think as well, and I mean, we've discussed previously, and I agree with you on this sort of generational trauma that exists in Albania, you know, from communism, from the transition, from 97, all this repressed anger and resentment, it gets passed down to generations and things. And then you throw in the mix something like social media. I mean, Prime Minister Edi Rama has said he wants to look at ways to limit, if not ban, access to social media for adolescents. And I'm completely with him on this. I think some of the things that you come across in social media are terrifying, and you have this young mind which is growing up in this complex situation, easily influenced, and then they're sitting on social media and they have access to this content that glamorizes drugs, violence, gangsters, aggression, toxic masculinity, you know, and I think this has to have an impact on the youth as well, especially in this unique Albanian context. What are your views on the social media use among youth? Do you think banning it for people under 18 is a possible solution?
I mean, first and foremost, I think 18 is a little bit too old because you can't really control someone at 18 years old and say, you know, but I do think that Australia has a law that's, or they're actually working on one, 16 and under, where they don't have their ban in electronics. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much this is going to work psychologically, because sometimes when you take something away, people want to like just put their hands into, but I have more of a softer solution. What I've seen here in US and with my kids and what it happens, a lot of the kids have phones nowadays, which I absolutely agree. I wish that the phones were not part of their lives, because it is the biggest drug. They tend to, we all actually tend to focus too much on scrolling, and if you're not wise enough, which I don't expect a teenager or a child to be wise enough, then of course we have the algorithms that whatever you're watching is going to increase. So if someone is already troubled as a teen and they're watching something that includes violence, now those violent acts are going to pop up. One thing that I've been really surprised with my kids' school actually is that even though they have electronics, they take electronics away from morning until 5 o'clock. And then it's the parents' responsibility what they do after, mm-hmm. which as a parent, I'd lie if I were to say that I cannot, I haven't had a conflict with my child when it comes to electronics. But I think it's really important for parents and children to communicate and to increase awareness how this is a problem with the community, not just with kids. And lead by example. If I am on the phone all day, I can't tell my child not to be, because eventually they're going to sneak around and go and get it.
Yeah, but I can't help, I have a daughter. There are times I've given her the phone, maybe I've had an interview. I've been at home and she's been off school and I've had an interview and I've had to give her the phone or whatever. And I swear I can tell a difference in the way she interacts with me after she uses a phone for a certain amount of time, after she uses, like, she doesn't engage. It takes her some time to get back to her normal self, like how she interacts. She's a bit snappy, a bit sort of like moody. It's weird, this effect has on her. So this, and as well, sometimes I feel that this time that kids are spending on their phones after school, at the weekends, etc., that is time that previously would have been filled with parenting. And I think if your kid is in their room on a tablet, and you as a parent, you are not having that time with them, you're not engaging with them, you're not teaching them, you're not correcting their path, you're not figuring out if they've got something going on, if there's some problem, you're not noticing changes in their behavior or their mood or their demeanor because you're not communicating with them. We have a generation now which is being raised by social media and by screens, not with the same level of attention that parents used to give before. I'm not blaming the parents for what happened yesterday, earlier this week. That's not the case. But I think I worry that if we continue down this path of parents being so detached from their kids, that things like this are more likely to happen because parents are just not going to notice the warning signs.
Absolutely. But I also think it's important to stress that it is a way to disconnect, right? So if the parent is isolated and it doesn't have help and is a single parent or both parents are working, it's impossible to actually ask that parent to just be on 24/7.
Yes.
So we need to work on a community. What I've noticed, I was born and raised there. I grew up there. So what I noticed is that at the time, I had my grandmother and my grandfather being more engaged and my aunts and everyone else. And here in US is very similar. When you're a parent, it can be very lonely because you have to do it all on your own. So that is one issue. The other issue is, I want to stress what you mentioned about with your daughter. When kids are on the phone, the outcome when you take the phone away, which I would always suggest at least prepare their brains 5 more minutes and that's it, and be boundaried. But even if you did that, the side effects of a phone is exactly like a drug.
Yeah.
I mean, kids are irritable, they're angry, they don't take this away. So this is what I want to stress the most for our community, that phones can be extremely addictive. And it is like you're giving your kid cocaine or heroin. And I hate to say this, but as someone that has worked in substance abuse for so many years, it's extremely dangerous. So you need to have some type of balance with these phones. Also, what I mentioned earlier is that if these phones can take you anywhere in the world, now you're exposed to the whole world and to anyone that's dangerous and wants to do bad things, right? So this is also the difference in Albania, because before, not only in Albania, but I'm sure even in UK, I don't know if you had an iPhone at a young age, but I know I remember here in US, I had like a dinky phone, Nokia, which I love. And that didn't give me that much access. Now kids have access to everything. So if the brain is developing, if this kid is troubled, if his kid has been neglected or abused, if there is domestic violence in the family, even if that doesn't happen, let's say that this kid just scrolls, that will pop up. That's why this is so important. It's a drug. It's important for parents to regulate. It's important for their parents to model that, and teachers and anyone around. And how can we come together as a community to better our community? Because right now, yes, we have 35 years of democracy, but what that means is that from a complete isolation, now you're kind of like open to
Overload.
an oyster, of, the whole thing. And it is our responsibility to put boundaries around. That does not mean that you have to be beating your kids up or yelling at them, you know, not an authoritarian way, but the parents should have enough voice to say, look, let's sit on the table, especially with teens. You know, I have an 11-year-old. He's a preteen or a full-on teen, but I usually talk to him. I say, okay, what is our agreement? We sit on the table, we discuss it. We've agreed that he uses the phone for 2 hours a day, and then the phone is turned off. That is completely normal. Now, because of this tragedy, I don't really want to make it all about the phone. Again, I want to stress trauma. I want to stress, I don't know how this kid is raised, the one that was stabbing. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, but I read that, you know, this poor child was stabbed 6 times. What it really tells me is that the other child that did this act, this you know, hateful act, was probably in a state of trauma. To just go and do that over and over and over again.
It's not just
you're
a
not in the right
one-time.
mind.
Yeah.
And then you stopped because you freaked out. It's like you kept on going, which the child is in a trance. And I want to call this person a child because if he was a 14-year-old,
It's a child.
you're still a child.
Yes,
The brain is not developed until we're 23. If you're lucky enough
Or
to have
older in
healthy
some
parents
cases.
and you've done your work. Yes, or we're still growing, all of us.
I mean, I wanted to ask as well, you know, in the US, in the UK as well, it's not, maybe, okay, they're much bigger countries, but these things do happen more regularly, it seems. I mean, it happened when I was living in the UK. I knew there were cases, and in inner cities in the UK, they have metal detectors in schools, so you have to pass through a metal detector to enter the school. Staff, some have security. You are allowed to be searched on the school premises as a student, like they have the right to search you. And this is a whole new world in a way for Albania, you know, the thought of having to do this. I remember there was talk a while ago of having security at schools and people were quite shocked about it. But now they're sort of in the streets blaming the government, blaming the police, blaming this, blaming that. And I'm just wondering where we go from here. You know, I don't think it's the government's fault. I don't think it's the police's fault. I think everyone in society has a part to play in when it comes to sharing blame for situations like this. But I'm just, instead of blaming, I'm wondering how do we go forward from here? How can we, I don't think we can prevent things like this from happening, but what can we do to try and prevent things like this from happening at an individual level?
Well, first and foremost, I think that the idea of blaming is just ridiculous because you're only going to perpetuate the problem. I'm not saying that people should not be accountable, but to go on the streets and start saying the police or the government and all that, it almost becomes politicized. So I think it has to start within us, within ourselves. You know, I was really shocked when I noticed that people were walking by, and I don't know how true this is, by the way, so please correct me, because I don't live there and I haven't been there in a while, but people were walking by and they did not do anything. That does not necessarily mean because people didn't care. It can also mean that people were afraid.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what was going on, right? So there are two sides of this story. The other thing is, once you start getting on the streets and being angry and requesting some type of change, it's almost to me like you're saying, it's your problem, not mine. We have to start with ourselves if we want to see a change. You know, I will start with my own child and say, look, this happened. I actually had this conversation with my kid and said, this is what happened in Albania. And I really think that it could be stress and it could be so many things and phones and knives. Why would people do this? Just so he can be aware that not only this happens, but how can you not do this? And how can you not pretend, but protect the other kid if something like that happened, right? So it starts within the family. It should not start on the street. Who am I to tell? But as a psychologist, that's what I'd start.
Yes.
Family, community, small communities, school, and then you can actually require a change to change the policies, such as banning the cell phones for 16 and under, which I think is completely doable if we come across as the world, not only one country. The other part, I think you mentioned something, you know, what can we do in this situation? I really do think that mental health is very, very important here because there is no way that this person was in the right mindset. And if a child has been neglected and abused, these are some of the outcomes.
Yes.
So what we can also do is introduce, and I don't know how it is in Albania, I know it's limited, the mental health piece, limited in education, limited in psychologists and how much they know and the training that they need. But also limited on the clients going. I mean, I
Yes.
see Albanians even here in Chicago and in US being resistant to some degree to it.
There's a
So
stigma as
Care
well.
for yeah, it's stigma. And Care for Albania is the first mental health organization in US for Albanian American community. Now, I know we have mental health providers in Albania. I just don't know how much work they're doing because of the limitations of what I mentioned earlier.
We have the lowest ratio of psychiatrists per capita in Europe as well. It's a really bad situation. There's a stigma around it. People don't seek help. So even, I think it begins with talking to your kids. Talk to your kids. You have to find out what's going on with them so you can notice the changes in their mood, their behavior, talk to their teachers. I hope my daughter won't be angry with me for sharing this, but she had some issues in school a few months ago where she was behaving not well with the other kids. So that required significant work with her at home, conversations, discussions, little role playing, incentives and punishments and things. It required significant work to work through that period with her. But I was only aware of what was going on because I sit and talk to her every night and I try. I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent, I'm not at all, but unless you're talking to your kids and are prepared to put...
Nobody is.
Sorry?
Yeah. No, I was saying nobody is a perfect parent because we really don't know what kind of child you have, the temperament and the issues that come up in this day and age, which are very different from what we had. So I'm sounding like my mom. During my time, this did not happen. So we're dealing with new issues. However, I also do think that the communication between the parent and the child, but most importantly, is the parent doing their own work to be healthy?
Yes.
Because if the parent is not attuned to their own needs, they're not going to look at their kid emotionally, their emotional needs. I mean, I think that Albanian parents are excellent parents when it comes to basic needs, food, taking care, giving, trying to give what you need. When it comes to emotional, psychological, you have to do your own work in order to actually raise a child that's psychologically healthy.
Yes.
So I had to do my own work as an Albanian to actually raise healthier kids and break that cycle. So I wouldn't even go straight to the child. I would go to the parents and to the teachers and to mental health providers. Are they healthy? Are they doing their work? Instead of saying, I'm a psychologist. I usually tell people this all the time. I'm a psychologist and I have done my work. I have my own people that help me because we're all breakable. And this is how we break the stigma in our community. So start with yourself, talk to your child, talk to the teacher. Communication piece, for example, is really complicated because it's not that people don't know how to talk, it's that people don't know how to put emotions into words.
Yeah, this is very...
And what happens to the brain when you're really frustrated with your child or with a teacher, for example, or the teacher with a child, the first thing that happened is the language goes out of the window. And then you tend to kind of like go into like punishment or it's normal. It's normal. And that's okay. But how do you really calm yourself? Like one of the things that I do with my kids is instead of giving them timeouts and putting them in a room, I take timeouts. I say, I am going to calm myself down and come back and be in charge of this situation.
I'm just going to take a note of that for my own use. Mummy's going for timeout. See you tomorrow.
Yes, it's a win-win.
Yes. Sunila, thank you very much. Thank you for your expertise, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. Inside Albania is on Euronews Albania every Saturday. You can also catch up with us on our YouTube channel, Euronews Albania, and across all major podcasting platforms. Until next week, Mira Pavshim.